Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the EMS Handoff Podcast, your source for all things EMS. As we get started back for another week, we would like to send a shout out to our distributor, our host of this podcast, the Journal of Emergency Medical Services, or JEMS. Make sure you can stop by and see their stuff at their website, and thank them for hosting us. So at the very end, we're going to talk about making sure to rate and review, to give them credit, but also to give them feedback on us. And for another week, we welcome back our co-host, Eric McCullough and Bradley Dean. Things are growing up in the handoff world, guys. I think you all saw Eric's post this last week. Jim's shouted out some great news as we distributed Tim's podcast this last week, talking about the pediatric restraint, that we have some listeners out there. It's not just us listening to ourselves. So what do you think, Bradley? Is your week going as well as our podcast is?
Man, this week was busy with our continuing education sessions, but it was a great week.
So I'm really starting to think, so you sent me a picture about midweek. I really think you just have some of these things in reserve. You just chill. You're like, hey, I'm working on the truck tonight. You got this nice little background in the chief's office there. I really don't know. I'm kind of questioning what's going on over there in North Carolina.
Oh man, no, we're staying busy, but it's good.
All right, it's staying away from the COVID bug still.
Yeah, I rolled up my sleeve and got my shot.
There you go. I still have not yet, being in the education realm and not out in clinicals. I don't fit any of the tiers just yet, but I'm thinking the military is going to get us. We had some documentation to sign this last month, and I think next month probably going to be it. But so let's head from east to west, and really when we talk about east to west, it's really kind of a short area there. It's about how tall Eric is sideways. So let's go to Eric McCullough over in Middle Tennessee.
I've been doing good. We've been doing a lot more stuff on social media. So I encourage everybody to like our group on Facebook. We have some interactions and stuff there. We're on Instagram now too. And so we're constantly putting out stuff there, which is pretty cool because we're seeing a lot of people share the information and share the stuff good for instructors or providers or whoever. So this has been pretty awesome to see the growth.
And so one of the things that we haven't really talked about much, but certainly something that you can do, engage with Eric there. But if you ever have an interest of being a guest on the show, you have a topic area, please feel free to put that in one of our social medias as well. Eric will get that out to us, and we can potentially have you on. And speaking about guests, it's about time to get started in yet another fun-filled, mind-blowing guest conversation. So Bradley, why don't you go ahead and introduce us to our guest from this week?
So joining us today is Julianne Stevenson. She is the founder of Sterling Credentials. She's been a paramedic, a supervisor, an educator, an educational program director, and through a strange turn of events, she has a BS in biomedical science, a master's degree in molecular physiology and biophysics. And decades ago, she got into EMS by accident, but today, her passion keeps her here. Julianne, thank you for joining us.
It is my pleasure. I appreciate y'all having me.
So I watched this one television show at one point, and in there, they're like, hey, what is this degree? And that person just come back, and it's like, it's an expert in what I'm getting ready to talk about. All things, that's not necessarily the direction we're going to get, because if so, people are going to hit stop at this point. But in addition to that, we're just going to go ahead and toss out here that Julianne and I are actually putting together. Actually, Julianne put it together, and she just decided to invite me because she thinks I have something to say, and I guess sometimes I do. We're doing a mastermind group together on program direction, trying to some of the things we're going to talk about today also hit the EMS program director. So there's a lot of things. She's doing a lot of stuff. So Julianne, welcome. to the episode. Is there anything else that Bradley missed about you that you want us to know?
No, I think it'll all come out in the next hour.
Well, then let's get this roller coaster going. So we start off EMS and the affective domain. Why, Julianne, does it matter?
Well, so we have to first back up and decide what is the definition? What does that mean for those of folks that aren't in education? So in the educational realm, we talk about 3 domains of learning. The cognitive and the psychomotor, most people are very familiar with. The what you know and what you can do. The affective refers to behavior and professionalism. And, you know, when we look at it from a standpoint of accrediting the education programs, you know, there's certain minimum benchmarks that we have to meet to prove that we as educators are quote unquote doing our jobs. However, my experience in the field, which really only stopped about 2 years ago, indicated to me that we have a huge problem, and I think that it needs to be addressed. I mean, you think it matters, right?
I do. I do. And but we're here to talk about what you think that matters, and I'm just here to ask the questions about why it matters. And so let's get into that. So affect, we talked about this is us as a person. It boils down to how you communicate with each other, the level of respect, the soft skills a lot of times that not a lot of people think about. So we're not talking about innovation. We're not talking about tourniquets. We're not talking about administering medications or protecting the spine or putting on a splint of any kind. This is that compassion, that empathy, that ability to get yourself on the truck to the scene and make sure that when that person is in their most intimate time of need, inviting you into their house or their wherever they are at that time, you're there to take care of them.
Right. And the challenge for a lot of people, I think, in terms of from an educational standpoint, but also from a peer colleague standpoint, is figuring out how to address issues, how to define issues, and how to sort of take this really nebulous cumulus cloud of characteristics and convey it, communicate it. I think it intimidates a lot of people. You know, if your student stinks, you have to figure out a way to let them know that they stink, because that's not professional, without, you know, offending them, frankly.
Before their issue offends somebody else.
Correct.
And so,
correct.
All right, so let's go into this. So when we talk a lot about EMS, before we get into this, we kind of got to set the scene, set the expectations. So as an EMS provider, we are a public entity. We're there to help the citizens and visitors of our town, wherever that may be. It may be a small community, it may be a large municipality, right? So what does the public expect from us?
You know, I think that is a question that bears more digging into, because you have everything on the spectrum from, no, I'm not going to tell you what my problem is, I'll just wait until the doctor at the emergency room, all the way to, why aren't you doing more? In terms of what does the public expect skill-wise? But what do they expect affective-wise? I think, and I don't have the data to back this up, so there may be some hiccups here, but I think that they expect you to come in and take over the stress of the situation. Now, for different people, that's going to mean different things, and we've all been in that situation where, you know, you have to know your audience. In some scenes, you have to be very soft and small and kind and quiet. And on some scenes, you have to be the bull in a china shop, right? We've all been there. And so what the public expects, I really want to ask, what does the public expect when they see you in uniform in the grocery store getting what you need to cook tonight's dinner? What do they expect of you there? What do they expect if they know you sort of casually and they know that you're in EMS. This came to the forefront of my mind one time when one of my own students came to orientation for advanced. So she'd been through our program already for EMT, and she was wearing a shirt that says, "I'm a medic. It's my job to save your ass, not kiss it." Now, obviously, there was a failure on my part to communicate what is proper and professional and appropriate for us. And when I had the conversation with her, what she told me was the shirt had a lot of emotional value to her because it was given to her by a mentor. So the question becomes, from an educational standpoint, again, we're only with these students a few months, and then they're out there with presumably your listeners, you all, the professionals, and they're out there with you for their student rotations. And if we as a profession are not modeling good behaviors, but then also backing that up with, the conversations that'll clarify those things. I mean, it's always about actions. Actions tell the story. But then I think we got to have some words to go along with that at times.
Okay. So let's actually even go, you kind of alluded to it, but before we kind of get into what the public expects from us, because we're going to go in a different route here in just a second, let's go back before that. And what does the public know about us? Because that kind of changes as well. So let's go ahead and go there, and then we'll kind of advance this in the direction that you just took it.
Well, unfortunately, this is another big hairy web, right? Because even we don't know who we are. There's this ongoing discussion. Are we public service? Are we allied health? And that's probably a whole nother discussion for a whole nother day. But I think that's where the public perception question comes in, because there's even the discussion about, the uniform. Should it be more public servicey or should it be more healthy? Well, you know what I mean?
So I'm even going to toss in, because there's actually a third subcategory, and are we just transportation? Because that's some people's and I have specific references about that as well, but there are still some that they don't even think the public service or public safety side or the health side, that we are just there to pick them up, kind of going back to the original kind of days of the hearse, where they just picked them up, put them in the back before the accidental death and disability came out and said, hey, we needed to do something about morbidity and mortality. So what you're kind of saying is, not even talking about the internal profession itself, the public doesn't even know what we are. So we have an identity issue there, which then when we come into ourselves, having those professionals come into our educational classes, we have an identity crisis. And then let's go ahead and go the direction is, what does our EMS agencies expect from us?
Yeah, and I think that even varies, right? Because it can be anywhere from the sort of very paramilitaristic public service, making sure every time you go out, it's a public relations event, and it is, to the not saying anything when your uniform looks crappy. Your whatever that is for you, because everybody has their kind of things. What is that? And I think, the point of bringing all this up, because these are the same discussions that we've been in for the 20 some years that I've been in the industry, and they're circular, because we haven't come to a consensus on who we are, what it means, and how we should be carrying ourselves. I have a personal point of view, which others may or may not disagree with, which is that we are with people in their most, like you said, intimate times of need, and we should carry ourselves that is the honor that it is. Yes, 80% of the runs we make are not acute, but being nice is free, So if we could get in front of this as an industry, as professionals, and come to that consensus in whatever aspects we want to look at, whether that's uniform or definition or identity, then we would have a coordinated front to present to the public, which is essentially who our students are when they walk through the door.
So you have opened Pandora's box here, and I'm going to jump in.
I know.
I don't care if we're public safety. I don't care if we're healthcare. I don't care if we're transportation. I don't care if you are the person running the cash register at the grocery store or the local fast food restaurant. There are some core values that define professionalism. And that's the key thing that we're looking at here. And those are honesty, integrity, caring, compassion, altruism, empathy, having respect for others, and being trustworthy. It doesn't matter where you work. If you exhibit those things, you are professional.
That's a very nice summary. I like that a lot. So
guys, 15 minutes in and we're done. Hey.
No, sorry. You opened the box, my soapbox.
No,
so
but
anyway.
I think you make a good point, because there was a post on LinkedIn, and I can't remember, somebody else had posted, it was about preceptor training. Do we need more preceptor training, whatever. And I had made some comment on it. And I want to tell you, there were a handful of current brand new practitioners who reached out to me to tell me how terrible their preceptor experience had been. One of them was from Australia, so I can't really help her, but the fact is it's a problem. And so this discussion that we're having is not just relevant to educators. It's relevant to you practicing medics out there, because instead of eating our young, which is what we're known for it. It's memeable. It's so bad. What are we doing? Why are we doing that? What I don't get it.
I've had this conversation a lot here in the past little bit. As we kind of grown up in the profession, and I kind of look at all of us here, because I think if we looked at our start times, we're going to be relatively close, maybe a couple years off. But we all grew up, and people would come up to us like, "Hey, I would like to be a paramedic." And no, you don't, and laugh them off and kind of go. But now, what we've seen, and I've actually seen it because I've had conversations with the individuals where people are like, "No, you don't want to go here. You want to go somewhere else." And so when we talk, but then again, out of the other side, they're going, "Hey, if only we had somebody else working here, I could get off, or I wouldn't have to work as many extra shifts or do this or that." So, this is kind of a systemic discussion. It's not just a localized, regionalized thing that affects Julianne's area. It's not affecting my area. It's not affecting Bradley's area. It's not affecting Eric's area. It's affecting the profession as a whole. And I like the way Bradley mentioned it just a minute ago. It really doesn't matter. I've gone from working in the legal community to working in grocery stores, to working in retail, to being in the fire service, to being in EMS, and now education. And everybody has their thoughts about professionalism. It takes this or takes that, but stealing something from one of my instructors and a good friend of mine, that sometimes all it takes is a kind word and a gentle touch. And that makes it professional, because, the more conversations we have here, people say, "Oh, for us to be taken as a professional, we need this as a 2-year degree. To change, to be a professional, we need to be paid more, which means we're going to have to educate more and stuff like that." But a lot of it is just those, again, that when you take a look at that degree side, that's taking care of that cognitive and psychomotor domains, but not that ability to build somebody up, to take that in. Now, on our side, one of the things that we do is talk to our students, talk to our preceptors as well. It's like, "Hey, look, the preceptor has every right to submit whatever grade for you, but you also are grading them. And if you have an issue, bring it back to us and let us address it. And we've had some individuals like, hey, I went out there and Julianne said this, 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 and this. And we're like, okay, we can see where that comes from. There may have been some, personality conflict, but then we're also saying more because, that's not building the profession. It's not building you. And, look, you're already looking to get out of the profession before you even get done with the program. So, toxic cultures, brain drain of EMS. So let's get there. So I think all of us have been in the probie, the rookie phase, and you get to clean the toilets and scrub the wheel wells and whatever else it comes. Tell us about the brain drain of EMS.
Well, I mean, again, this isn't just a regional thing. I think everybody's pretty aware that the average lifespan of a paramedic is around 5 years, give or take. And we have to ask the question, why is that? And everybody says, oh, it's the pay, it's the pay, it's the pay. Well, one of the things that the data shows in just general studies of how pay motivates employees is that it has an effect for approximately 28 days. You give somebody an X% raise, they're grateful for about 28 days, and then it goes away. And I just, certainly that is one aspect, but those of us who got into EMS to help people, quote unquote, to help people, there's a lot about it that's really beneficial, that's really addictive. I mean, it's not the adrenaline. It's those distilled moments in time where you can make the difference just by, like you said, a kind word and a soft touch. So I don't even know where I was going. It's my early dementia here. Oh yeah, brain drain. So where do they go when they leave? They usually, now I'm saying this like I have data and I don't, but from my personal experience, they usually go on to a quote unquote better medical profession. And the reports that I've gotten back from those people is that they're so much nicer. Those nurses are so much nicer. Those PAs are so much nicer. It's not, oh, I'd make so much more money. They're just so nice. And I think that it comes back to the way that we treat ourselves and the way that we treat each other from a professionalism and behavior standpoint.
Well, I'm going to kind of insert there because this is one of those, you take the old adage, the grass is always greener. And that might not necessarily be the case. Now, it may be slightly greener than what they have, at least for a period of time. I'll tell you two different examples that I've had here recently. One, we had a local hospital entity that took us off of their clinical rotation for a semester because they were bringing in 50 new nurses for, I believe it was an 8-week orientation because they needed the personnel and they found a source and they brought them all in. And by the time they got done with their 8-week orientation, they had 23 individuals that remained. So, when we're talking about a lot of this is actually going beyond, but a lot of times because EMS is kind of in its, for lack of a better state, it's going from that middle school. It's basically going through middle school right now, and it's trying to figure out which area they're going to be when they grow up. And there's a lot of changes that are going on, and in the midst of COVID and different things, there are so many things. We're seeing added calls. We've got a good economy, so there's less people available for jobs, and so there's a lot of stuff that's going on. And as you mentioned, and I'll reference a little bit here as well, the state of Georgia, actually, the individual is now actually their director, if I remember correctly, but they did a workforce study 2 years ago, I think is when it got published. It was actually his doctoral dissertation, and it got funded by the Trauma Foundation in Georgia. And there's a lot of information talking about why people leave. And it's not money. And a lot of them basically kind of lump it back to that basic term of professionalism. And so let's talk about that. What is words? So you hear the term professionalism tossed around a lot of it in EMS, because that's something we have to attain to get the reputation, to get the effects that we want. But let's talk about what professional and professionalism mean in your head.
Well, the reason that I propose this as something to talk about is because it's something that each individual can control. It doesn't cost us anything, and it takes relatively little effort. And to me, professionalism is sort of a phased thing, right? The first phase is the visual impression, because whether we want to admit it or not, humans are visual creatures. We make these snap judgments from our rat brain within milliseconds of looking at someone. And so that first impression of appearing professional, which to me means clean and pressed and put together. I don't have a preference about the uniform. I would rather not wear a badge because that tears old people's skin. But that it doesn't matter how extreme your uniform is. If the person wearing it does not keep it clean and neat and pressed and put together and ready to go, then it doesn't matter. They're still going to look like crap. We're going to go to polos because those will be easier. Okay, but the people that aren't paying attention to their presentation are still going to look like crap. So that's phase one. And then phase two is in those things, like we talked about before, the respect and the compassion and the trustworthiness that have to be expressed in your actions. Yes, your words for sure have to represent that, but if the actions don't back it up, then you're not trustworthy. Like you can't have one without the other kind of thing. You can't have the words and no actions. So to me, those are the things that would encompass professionalism. That T-shirt that I referenced, there's a nice selection of ones just as bad and worse, specifically for EMS. There's about 10% of that I've been able to find available for nurses. And I hadn't found one that says, I'm a doctor. It's my job to save your ass, not kiss it. So I think this is something that we as a core group could completely change. In fact, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm sure somebody's wondering if being a medic is so great, why did you go to education? All right. The reason that I went into education was when I was a supervisor, I got very discouraged by the people that did not want to improve themselves. They say 80% of the people just want to go to the job, do the job, and go home, be left alone. Well, that turns out to be true. And I had already been teaching up to at that point. And those people that come to school, they want to be better. And so I had a passion for that. The second motivation was, is there a possibility that in about 10 years, there'll be some critical mass of individuals in this region who all come from the same mindset of this professionalism, this trustworthiness, this compassion, who will be moved into leadership positions, thereby changing the face of EMS in the region? Yeah, the answer was no. Because they get out there and they get the snot beat out of them by their colleagues for being too idealistic or, pie in the sky, dreams of grandeur. And that's really not it at all. It's if we could, as individuals, represent ourselves in the best light possible, you can have a honeymoon phase with every single patient, because every single time you get a time to start over and have the perfect relationship for that 20 minutes that you're with them.
So I'm going to give you. Go ahead.
That's all right. Go ahead. The obvious, if you don't, is the thing just continues to be a monster.
So I'm going to kind of take that back just a little bit, and my wife loves any time that I use her as an example in any of our stuff. But when she was pregnant with our first child at 15 weeks, she had to go in because of some abdominal pain, and ultimately found out that luckily the pregnancy actually aided in getting us to the hospital early when her appendix started to cause a problem. And so we were there and went through a round of tests. Then one evening, they basically said, we believe it's the appendix. We're going to have the surgeon come in and talk, and we're going to see what he ultimately says. So about 9 o'clock that evening, the surgeon comes in and he starts to go through his process, and he's sitting, we're in the antepartum room at the hospital because she is pregnant. That's what they wanted her associated with all the labor and delivery nurses. It was great. So there was a rocking chair. He sat down in the rocking chair. Well, as he's sitting there rocking in this chair, he's like, now, ma'am, closes his eyes and just keeps rocking. What we're going to do, and like, he's going through what we're thinking is these like micro sleeps. And it's like, do we really? As soon as he left, we're like, yes, sir, all this. And as soon as he left, the nurse came back in and said, what do you think? Is like, do we need to find another surgeon? Because this guy couldn't stay awake. It's that presentation, and it was a very, very small interaction that we had with this guy. And they said, no, this is the guy you want. That's the way that he processes things. But we immediately took that into his care. He's going to fall asleep while he's got the scalpel in her belly. Right. And so, just something like that. And so you kind of mentioned there the shirts, and, there's a whole conversation, and we're going to bring this back up because we do have this down as one of our topic areas. But you talked about the shirt and what does it need to look like? Is it going to the polo shirt, going to the t-shirt, etc.? But one of the things that you mentioned is, it looks bad, and here's the thing is at any given time, because of our profession, it's very unlike being in the hospital. You may sweat while you're in the hospital, but you don't have to worry about a thunderstorm. You don't have to worry about some idiot driver driving by and splashing a mud puddle up on you. But one of the things that professionalism takes into account, and I'm gonna shout out on the Army side as well, that I was on in town here. We have an event called the Mountain Man Memorial March, which is a march for veterans. There's a half mile, there's a full marathon, or a half marathon and full marathon march through one of our mountain towns up here. And you see the Army guys that are out there, and they have their backpack on, and they have about 4 different sets of socks in that backpack. And they have points that are marked off. And once they get there, doesn't matter what's going on, they all stop, take off the boots, put on a new pair of socks, put the boots back on, and they keep the ruck going, right? And so they always tell you, you take care of your feet, they take care of you. And part of that professionalism is understanding how your body works, how your environment works, and being prepared for that. In the event of it's storming, so you have a raincoat and the gear that you need, but you also have that replacement. And one of the things that gets me is, we go on a bad call, so I can't keep my uniform clean. Well, I know that those boots haven't seen a lick of polish since the day that they come out of the box. And I understand from this Army and Air Force side, I will tell you one thing we know how to do is polish our boots. And there is no doubt about that. Now that we have suede, it's a different story, but I know how to polish some boots, especially being on a drill team. I know that I may scuff a boot on one of these calls, but they're not going to be down to the fabric underneath. And and just that, and that really doesn't. Once you get a pair of boots that's good and in good condition, it takes you 10 minutes to touch them up. And so it's just knowing, and I kind of make this mention of all of our clinical students before they go out. It's like, hey guys, here's the things you're going to need. Get you a go bag. You have a different backpack that you can put your book down in, so you can study, or your books in while you're out there. You can study, but you need to have something to drink, something to eat, because you may not get a chance, and it needs to be something that you don't have to go to a microwave or something like that. You have some money in case you do get some stuff, and you have a replacement of your uniform stuff in case you get messed up. And so that all kind of goes along. So you kind of mentioned that back, but a lot of that just the prior planning prevents piss poor performance. And I'm just going to the 6 P's and toss that out there. And that's really what it is.
Well, but to be fair, I'm talking about the arrive at the start of the shift looking like a bag of crap. You know,
Right.
I think you're right. We get puked on and we get whatever, and sometimes 2 uniforms, some shifts, 2 uniforms still isn't enough. But I'm talking about the walk through the door, dude.
One pant leg
Dude, what
still
do you
tucked
do?
in the sock and untied boots. Yes. You know, and part of that.
Yeah. Now,
we
when
do
we talk about
understand.
those first impression things and the toxicity in the culture and what are these things, you know, I always told my students when they went to their first shift at any given rotation to take food, because otherwise there would be no reason for anyone to speak to them. They don't have this problem as much at the clinical sites because usually we had our preceptor there who was taking care of them, but at the field rotations at the ambulance sites, it was a struggle to prepare students for the cold shoulder that they were going to get at particular locations. And if that's the first impression that a green wannabe has coming into the station, you know, what I almost think our professionalism problem is more peer-to-peer and colleague to colleague than necessarily to the patients. Although, to be fair, what I found were people who treated students poorly didn't treat patients much better.
And I think I think you bring up an excellent point. So let's say you're talking to a brand new green EMT. We can talk about toxic traits and environments and stuff, but can you just, and it's obvious to those of us who've been in these situations, and sometimes it's not. So it's kind of good to verbalize and vocalize what does specific toxic traits or environment, what do they look like, and how can we respond to those incidents without having our emotions attached to our sleeves?
So from a student perspective, one of the things I think we forget, and we probably forget it with patients to a degree too, is how scary this unknown environment is. All humans are afraid of unknowns. And so if the person coming into the situation is already fearful and uncomfortable, be that a student or a patient, then it is our job, since that ambulance is our home, to make them feel welcome like you would a guest in your home. I think that the toxicity among each other, it is kind of difficult to address because it's almost like we've had the cancel culture for a lot longer than, you know, the recent, you know, rise that we've kind of seen. In terms of, you know, the guy on the shift before me, I was brand new, you know, and so I wasn't trying to tell anybody how to do their job, but I said to him one morning at shift change, I've probably been there, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months. I said, could you, I mean, and he was known for having pride about making people cry. Like that was his claim to fame. I mean, he was the airway man. He was the guy. But it was also known that, you know, one of his big goals in life was to make new people cry. And so one morning I asked him, I said, you do know that I do not use the urinal, correct? And he said, yes. And I said, well, I have to walk past it to get to the pot that I do use. And my boots, they stick to the floor in front of the urinal every time. I said, could you please do your station duties? Like, I didn't think I was asking that much. Well, I mean, obviously he didn't, and nothing changed, but he never made me cry either. But, you know, why aren't we working together? Why aren't we all on the same team? We take enough crap from Medicine Proper, you know, about not being part of them. Why don't we start acting like we are? Like, be the change you want to see. Don't wait on education or more money or whatever. What made you love this job? And if that's not there for you anymore, then yeah, maybe it is time to move on. You don't got to take it out on other people.
Well, you know, and this kind of goes back to the comment earlier about grass being greener, because this is something that unfortunately, we see kind of everywhere, going to the fire side. We had the rookie side, the law enforcement. They have, and the same thing once you get in the hospital as well. I don't know that I've ever seen hazing any more than when you see a new intern or resident coming out of medical school, and they're going to do the scut work of it, and then they're going to try to take the scut work and pass it off to somebody else. But one of the key things is in this profession, we have to look at EMS as our own profession. There is not another profession out there that does what we do. We can't say we want to be like nursing because nursing does this, and they get respected for that. Medicine, they do, or physicians, they do this. Well, there's nobody that does medicine the way we do medicine. You take a look at a look at what we do between our protocols and our standing orders and what we're capable of doing. There's not another practitioner other than the physician that is capable. So one thing that I hear is, if we could only be like nursing, if we could only be like respiratory therapists, if we could only be, what if nursing was like us? What if respiratory was like us? What if physicians were like us? Now we have definitely that type A adrenaline, like the lights and sirens, and go doing all this stuff. And we can build this around that in itself.
Yeah, well, and so I don't know, I don't want to offend anybody with this terminology because I'm not one of those, but are we not kind of the special forces of medicine? I mean, you make an excellent point that instead of trying to say we're this or we're allied health or we're public service, we're not. We are a mutant, but we are a special kind. You're exactly right about that. And so can we not come to consensus on that we are special and that we are amazing, and that it is pretty incredible that we can get done what we can get done with what we're given to work with, and then use that as a springboard.
Right. And that's where I was actually getting ready to go is, once you have that experience, and I think every one of us on here could go into the war stories and talk about some of the different things. I've had some awesome experiences, some that I wish I'd never seen, some of them that are like, man, if you had only seen, basically one of those is like, here, hold my beer kind of thing. And
Yeah.
And then I have to realize that I'm only going to be in this profession for so long. And if I ever want to get out of it, there's got to be somebody to take my place. And while I'm here, I need somebody to work with me, because I don't know any, raise your hand on here if you are those in the verbal world. I'll tell you here in just a second. The answer is going to be none of them. But how many of y'all can drive the ambulance and take care of a critical patient at the same time?
Yeah.
Just exactly what I thought. Nobody raised their hand. Once you can, please let me know. I'd love to see that. We'll have you on as a guest, and you could show us how you do that. But we need each other. And the thing is when are you going to see that person that may be the EMT or advanced EMT in the truck with you? You're like, hey, stop the truck, get back here. I need you to do this stuff with me, because this patient, I can't do it on my own. And then, believe it or not, we need the nurses in the emergency department. We need them in the cath lab. We need the physicians that are in there. We need the respiratory therapists, because they're the continuum of care. It's not just us. We are healthcare, no matter what is going on. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
we've got a couple other things on our list.
Hang on, but just a basic, don't do that anymore. If you're somebody who is quote unquote above a basic, never, ever, ever say just a basic, right? We would always rather work with a capable basic than a crappy paramedic. Sorry, go ahead.
You've got me there as well. So I will tell you that there have been plenty of EMTs that have gotten me out of jam because they're like, hey, just do this. And they're there, they're fostering. They have that information. It's not just because we all work together. All right. So moving forward, we're going to go ahead. You jumped ahead just a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and tackle this. We don't have a whole lot of time, but I do want to hit here first because I think we're a combination of them both. Are we public health or are we public safety? Where do we fit?
Well, I do think that your statement and your idea about creating a new definition that is a hybrid is the way to go, because I could never see putting my students not. So I come from a background where we were educating with other public service careers. And the beauty of that is that all of these students going through their different academies, fire, law enforcement, EMS, they're all going to be on the street together in our region pretty soon. And so we had some interoperability things that would happen even from a student perspective. You know, when the law enforcement guys had to take their, pepper spray to the eyes, you know, we got to be out there to help them recover from that. So I would never separate from, in the educational aspect, them from that. But our focus, and I would say the vast majority of our cognitive and psychomotor, approach is healthcare. And if we're not teaching it or coaching it from a healthcare differential diagnosis perspective, then we're not doing our jobs right. So it was a long way of saying I'm not going to commit. I don't think it's either one.
So let's go on from that, because there's a lot, and that could be an hour in itself. So we may end up having you back on that one. But let's talk about, can we actually have, so as educators or even the preceptors are out there, do we have the ability to impact the higher order affective domains in just a short period of time? For an EMT, we may only have them for 3, 4, 5 months, and the paramedic obviously up to a year or longer. So do we have the ability to affect that in just that short period of time?
I think the short answer is not in any real appreciable way. We have capability to force them to behave in a certain way while they're with us. But when you look at Bloom's taxonomy, higher levels of the affective domain, those integrations into their value system, I don't think are possible in the short term. Now, if there is some hugely emotional event that occurs, then possibly. But I think we can model and we can teach about the concepts. I think there are some things, though, that probably are innate and probably are difficult to actually manifest any real change in the very short time. Now, you start talking about the 5 to 8 year time frame. Now it's not preceptors but partners. Then there is the possibility, because there is the possibility to create the change. Because I think for some people, nice guys don't ever win. And so there's no benefit to being nice, which essentially encompasses the professionalism that we were talking about, compassion and kindness and trustworthiness and mutual respect. And so I think that if you see someone who models that, who does have success, however you want to define that, which for me is happiness and contentedness, joy, real joy, then maybe you could be convinced that your way of not trying your best every day was not the way to go. I'll put it this way. I've never seen a whole transformation. That is not true. I had one that I could say was a real transformation. But I think if we don't try, we don't do anything.
So with that, there are a couple of things that are tied to the whole psyche of an individual for the affective domain before they get to us. So I'm going to ask this question. Should we have some type of a psych exam prior to school like law enforcement does?
I have thought for a long time that would be a really great idea, because we are this hybrid, right? I mean, do physicians have to do a psych eval before they go to medical school? Not that I know of. So, but LE students do, law enforcement students do. And I think that that may have something to do with the special pressures that we're under out there. Yeah, okay, we don't get paid enough to do a psych exam. Okay, maybe we don't. But I know that some of the stories that I've heard about what these individuals who were certified were capable of doing, who did, disappointing and very shocking. You know, how could you? We had a frequent flyer, and back in the days when I was in this region, she was known then. And even after I'd left that region, she was still known. She was known by my students. And our medical director at the time had said to us, "You are a public servant. She is the public, so you will serve her." And her chief complaint was always chest pain. And it came out years after I had left the region that a couple of medics had gone out there to pick her up, and that they had shot at her with an airsoft gun, and that they had transported her, put her in the back of the unit by herself while they both rode up front. Now, how is it that somebody who chooses to take care of other humans, to serve the public, would ever do something like that? And I'm sure that's not even like the worst anybody's ever heard of. If we're not holding each other accountable to a clean and tidy uniform, that is the beginning, the slippery slope of not holding each other accountable for other stuff. And it's very difficult. It's very challenging. And, you know, maybe, you know, how do you do it and not burn bridges? Well, it's all in your approach. If you're coming to another human out of love and compassion and concern, and I don't care if that sounds cheesy to you, because the fact is that it's all in our packaging. You are much more likely to be able to transmit the message than if you come in a holier than thou, you know, punching, squashing, beating up. That's not going to get you anything. But I think that the reason that I wanted to have this discussion is there are too many of us who see things and don't say something.
So
it doesn't have to be a gigantic confrontation that pisses everybody off. It can be an intellectual conversation, but you got to be able to come at it the right way.
So one of the things from a service level, from an education level, from an individual provider level, from the new student level, all of our goals should be to do one thing, and that is pursue excellence. We should look for those opportunities to build, not tear down. And that, like I said, that's all of us. So, you know, one of the things that you'll usually find when they come in, when my faculty come into my office, a student comes into my office, this isn't a let's tear Julianne down. You can tell me that you did. And I had one student who's like, that idiot teacher. Stop. That individual is a very highly intelligent individual. They made you mad. Understand. But we can talk about them with respect and just back up. All right. And this doesn't have to be polarizing, like you said. Hey, Julianne did this. Okay, let's talk about that. As soon as you go, well, that idiot Julianne, well, nothing's getting done. So let's just back up. Let's have that conversation. But all three, or all the levels involved, pursue that excellence. And you know, we understand. You know, there's what we've talked about on here with a few different individuals. With some of the mental health resilience and some other things, you know, we understand why some people get the way they've seen the things, and it's taken more of a toll on them. But we know that they've also gone through this obstacle course that's gotten them to there. And so if we kind of pull that back, so we've been here right at an hour, Julianne. This is a very long conversation, but I'm sure that there's going to be some individuals that find the opportunity to say, hey, I'd love to have this conversation a little bit more with you. So if you would just kind of wrap up your thoughts from today, and then also give our listeners a way to reach out to you if they desire.
All right, so this has to circle back to Sterling Credentials. It's an educational EMS educational management platform meant to empower our educators to kind of get out of the nightmare of all this tracking that we have to do so they can do the important stuff. And within Sterling, I have some tools built in to try to help make this management of the affective domain less intimidating, more sort of common across the whole staff where everybody's kind of involved. So it's more, like you said, supportive. You know, sometimes there's a good reason that we can actually help solve. But I think, you know, if the listeners to this podcast want to actually take some action to do something about this, then it starts with ourselves. And making sure that we are setting the best example, not only in how we carry ourselves, but how we treat those new folks or the new hire at your service. Because we really should be more of a family, which has the crazy aunt that wants to stick her nose in everybody's business and whatever over here. But you know, fire is always bragging about their brotherhood. Why don't we have that in EMS? So if you do want to continue the conversation, you can find me on LinkedIn, Julianne Stevenson, that's Stevenson, or you can get a hold of me through my website, sterlingcredentials.com. I appreciate you all having me tonight. I appreciate it. It's fun.
Hey, you know, and this, you know, so the good thing about this last hour is, you know, each one of us have a little bit of a differing opinion, but if we come together, we kind of bring those out. There's passion here that you can kind of hear, and Julianne especially. So there's a lot of good things. So if you all have any questions for Julianne, please. Oh, she's got one more thing. Let's go. Go ahead.
I got one more thing. I'm sorry. I forgot to mention the most important thing. Because this is something we can control, and because it doesn't cost us any money, there is a network that I have started to build specifically for EMS students and new practitioners, where we can consolidate and concentrate and give those people support that maybe end up in systems that are not so supportive. Oh, there it is. Thank you. So it's called the Sterling Effect. You can get to it through me, or if you go on mightynetworks.com and you search for the Sterling Effect, you can get a link. Come in there and be the support, because one of the problems I had as a medic was I felt alone in my pursuing excellence. People made fun of me and they ridiculed me and they put me down. I don't want our new kids to face that. And so if you agree with that, if that resonates with you, please come and join us at the Sterling Effect. We've got clinical discussions, we've got leadership discussions. It's kind of cool. And it's only a couple of weeks old.
It is, and I got invited to be one of the first ones on there, and you know, there's several good individuals, great conversations, but basically, you know, the social EMS is really it, and there's good conversations, one-on-one ways to kind of grow and develop, and have. And we've got some new people, some old people, and just kind of good stuff, and so. Definitely one of the things when we drop this episode, it'll be in the Sterling Effect as well, but that's available to anybody. As Julianne said, no cost there. But one, we want to thank you for coming on and spending the time. But I am going to turn it over to Eric real quick. He's been a little bit quiet back there, just kind of taking in. So I'm going to take his last thoughts and then hand over to Bradley before we wrap up for the night.
So my last thoughts would be, do your own assessment of people. So one of the things that I've seen that are pretty toxic is As soon as a new person comes in, whether it's a new graduate, a student, or whatever, the first thing you hear is all the bad stuff that they have done. And so you're like, oh, well, it's the popular opinion. This is the bad person, so I'm going to be like that too. And I have found that can be that's the farthest thing from the truth. Make your own assessment and then don't stir it around. Like there's no reason to contribute to it. All it does is it makes it worse. That's how we eat our young. A lot of times we say how we eat our young, but we don't know how we eat our young. That is exactly how we do it. I remember as a brand new paramedic that there were drugs I didn't know how to drop because we never did it in class. So I didn't know how to do, I didn't know how to reconstitute drugs. And the first time I had to do it was with a critical patient, and I had no idea. I had stuff here. And what did I hear for months afterwards from everybody? He's an idiot. He doesn't know how to reconstitute these drugs. Rather than someone going, oh, hey, dude, that's no problem. I'll show you how to do it. It's no big deal. But instead, they like to eat their young. And second, get out of the, well, back in my day mentality. No one cares. No one cares what happened back in your day. No one cares what cool, awesome stories you have. If you're a jerk to your fellow worker, if you're a jerk to your patient, none of your stuff matters. No one cares. No one's going to care. The best thing you can do is just be a good human being and help people out.
Amen.
And then we'll give Bradley the chance for the last thought on this one today.
So one of the things I would say is strive to exceed expectations, practice professionalism, since that's what we were, everything circles around tonight. Remember the core values that I talked about in the beginning. And then you only get one chance to make a good first impression. So demonstrate your personal dedication and service through action rather than anything else.
All right. So as we conclude today, certainly want to tell Julianne, thank you for taking this hour out of your busy schedule and the stuff that you're creating to do this great stuff. Guys, we're going to finish up today. And as we conclude, we'd like to say that we always look forward to recording these episodes and engaging with each of you. However, without your feedback, we do not know what you're thinking. So don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on the GEMS podcast platforms on both Apple and Google Play, and give them feedback and they give us feedback as well. But don't forget, not only do we have our long-standing Facebook group at the EMS Handoff, but Eric now has us live on Instagram at the EMS Handoff as well. Newest, he's popping out some daily stories and adding some stuff, but you can reach us out at both the EMS Handoff on Facebook and on Instagram. So, as I always say, as we end these episodes, make sure go out and do great things, stay safe, come home at the end of the